One of the most remote and inhospitable regions on Earth is being engineered into something new. It's happening quietly, methodically, and with purpose. Along the length of the Himalayas, roads are appearing where there were none. Runways are being extended at extreme altitudes. Rivers once left to flow freely are being dammed and diverted. When examined case by case, it looks like development, but stepped back. And it's not just the landscape that's being reshaped, it's the balance of power. The sheer scale of these projects dwarfs anything seen outside wartime. The terrain is being reconfigured for movement, reach, and accessibility. And accessibility matters here. The line of actual control, which is the de facto border between India and China, is not fixed by treaties, but by presence. Patrols define territory, and outposts define claims. And so, by building Dulu's infrastructure, assets that appear civilian but are strategic in function, Beijing is making its intentions clear. The locations alone say what words don't. Placed just high enough to look down on the rest of South Asia. Tibet is also rich in minerals such as chromium, copper, lithium, borax, and more. But the real game changer these days is uranium. Even tech giants like Microsoft, Nvidia, and Meta are making their moves. That's where today's sponsor, F3 Uranium, comes in. See the ticker on screen? In recent years, F3 Uranium has made one of Canada's biggest high-grade uranium discoveries. Based in the Athabasca Basin, which is one of the world's richest uranium deposits, their flagship junior zone is already being compared to major sites like NextGen S Arrow and Fission SRRR. With uranium demand set to rise by over 127% by 2030 and 200% by 2040. F3 Uranium is well positioned to ride that wave. Backed by a team with a billion-dollar track record, strong insider ownership, and fresh funding from Denison Mines, F3 Uranium is moving fast and staying focused. And so, as the world turns to nuclear energy to power AI data centers and energy security, F3 Uranium is in a prime position to be part of the solution. Check out their ticker on the screen and learn more by clicking the link in the description. Just make sure to do your own due diligence. China builds faster than the world reacts. Since 2020, it has launched over 300 new infrastructure projects across Tibet. The G219 highway has been widened and reinforced. What once took weeks to traverse can now move armored columns from Xinjiang to Tibet in days. Similar upgrades are underway on the G315 and G318 highways, all of which enable faster military movement toward Ladakh and Arunachal Pradesh. These aren't just roads anymore, they're military corridors. Airports, too, are expanding. At Shagat's Heping, new garrisons and drone facilities have been built. The airport now features helicopter landing pads, surface-to-air missile systems, longer runways, and fighter jets such as the J-11. With these upgrades, Shagat's Heping has effectively transformed from a civilian airport into a military hub capable of sustaining high-altitude air operations along the western Himalayan front. Similar expansion projects are underway at Shannonlongzi Airport and Angari Gunza Airport. The latter sits just 200 kilometers from Pangong Lake, where Chinese and Indian forces have in recent years clashed in melee combat. Meanwhile, up north, China has expanded the Shash Yarkant, Yushan Wanfang, and Ingari Burong airports. Each is now capable of serving both civilian and military operations. These upgrades add to a growing network that includes existing military air bases in Lhasa Gangar, Sganzhou, Mainling, Chengdu, Mangda, Hotan, Korla, and Tashkurgan, Kundrab. In total, at least 24 airports along the Himalayas have been converted into Dulu's facilities, with many located within 60 kilometers of the China-India border. That's some serious air power. But Beijing isn't done yet. It now aims to connect many of these airports and bases through railways such as the Sichuan-Tibet line. Once complete, the line will link Chengdu to Lhasa in under 13 hours, enabling the rapid movement of troops, ammunition, and equipment across 1,600 kilometers of rugged terrain. More importantly, it will branch into smaller tracks that reach even closer to the Indian border. China has been quite busy, but power projection isn't just about missiles and jets. Sometimes it looks like dams and turbines. That's why many of China's infrastructure projects in Tibet tie directly into hydropower. You see, China holds the world's largest hydropower potential, nearly 3 times that of the United States. Since the 1950s, it has built over 20,000 dams taller than 15 meters, making hydropower the country's second-largest source of electricity. Tibet alone accounts for nearly a third of that output. However, perhaps more crucially, hydropower gives China control over the headwaters of major rivers like the Brahmaputra, Mekong, and Salween. These are lifelines for the downstream nations. And so, with that leverage in mind, China is now building the largest dam on Earth in a remote stretch of the Himalayas on the Yarlung-Tsangpo River. The project, known as the Meta-Gabe Naga Dam, is estimated to cost around $137 billion, and it may well be the largest engineering project in history. Once completed, it's expected to generate 60 gigawatts of electricity, which is triple the output of the Three Gorges Dam and enough to power 300 million homes. Meanwhile, on the western end of the Himalayas, China is quietly working on a second megadam along the Mabya-Zangbo River. Technical details like its height, length, or capacity haven't been made public. But everything about the project suggests it will be massive in scale. However, just like with the dual-use infrastructure, the strategy here runs deeper than just generating electricity. Downstream countries like India and Bangladesh fear that once these dams become operational, China could weaponize water flow. For example, during an unrelated crisis or a negotiation, it could either release too much water and flood certain areas, or hold water back and trigger droughts. That sounds wild, but the concern is valid. The Metagab, for instance, feeds directly into the Brahmaputra, a river that sustains India's Arunachal and Assam regions and much of Bangladesh. Arunachal Pradesh is a particularly sensitive flashpoint. China considers it part of South Tibet and thus legally claims it as its own. India, however, controls it. So by pushing ahead with megadams on Tibet's rivers, Beijing isn't just generating power, it's moving closer to hydrohygy in South Asia. And this isn't without precedent. In the 1990s, China built a series of dams on the Mekong River in Yunnan province. Over time, these dams reduced the river's flow by nearly 50%, disrupting agriculture, fisheries, and local economies in Thailand, Laos, and Myanmar. History may be about to repeat itself. So, why is this all happening now? Well, energy demand is at an all-time high. The AI boom has kicked off a global tech race, one fueled by data and powered by processors. Training AI models requires massive computing power, and that means massive data centers. These centers consume staggering amounts of electricity. For perspective, a single hyperscale data center can consume between 100 and 200 megawatts, which is enough to power a small city. Multiply that by hundreds, and it becomes clear that winning the AI race will require nothing less than a complete overhaul of the power grid. Goldman Sachs estimates that power demand from data centers could rise by 50% by 2027 and by 165% by 2030. China is looking to stay ahead of the curve, and this chart shows what that looks like. While electricity generation in the United States has remained nearly flat since 1999, China has more than quadrupled its output and is now aiming to maintain that momentum. That's where Tibet comes in. It plays a crucial role in China's energy plans. Its rivers flow steadily throughout the year, and their high elevation gives them natural hydropower strength. That makes the Himalayas not just a border zone, but a future energy hub. So when China builds rail tracks into Tibet or dams on rivers near contested borders, it's not just about encircling India. It's about powering an AI economy, securing water control, and reinforcing sovereignty all in one stroke. For all its scale and scope, China's Himalayan buildup may not be what it seems, while the optics suggest belligerence. The rationale may be rooted in something else. Deterrence. Beijing's strategic focus is fixed on the eastern seaboard, not the Indian frontier. Taiwan is central to Chinese planning, but any conflict there would almost certainly draw in foreign powers. To offset this risk, China has worked to stretch American resources across flashpoints like Iran, Ukraine, and beyond. But even as its attention stays fixed on Taiwan and America, Beijing can't afford to overlook India. The two already share a long-contested border, and New Delhi's regional clout continues to grow. If China were to open a front in Taiwan, PLA deployments along the western line of actual control would thin out, which would give India a tactical window to press its claims in Aksai Chin. For context, Aksai Chin is the second major disputed region between China and India. It's controlled by the former, but claimed by the latter. Even without moving on Aksai Chin, India could rattle China's position by turning up the heat on Pakistan, Beijing's key regional ally. With Chinese forces tied down in the east, Pakistan could find itself without vital logistical and military support. Sensing opportunity, India might choose to press its advantage. One possible target is Pakistan's Gilgit-Baltistan region, a mountainous but critical stretch of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Even an incremental advance there could have an outsized impact. Indian occupation of Gilgit-Baltistan wouldn't topple Pakistan, but it would amputate the main artery linking it to China, and in doing so, shift the regional balance of power. By the way, just to be clear, this video is not a policy recommendation. It's an observation. There is no good or bad in geopolitics. It just is. A distracted China would, in effect, give India a free hand to target either Aksai Chin or Kashmir. And in geopolitics, opportunities like that don't come around often. And so, viewed through a realpolitik lens, China's militarization of the Himalayas isn't just posturing. It's a way to preempt an Indian preemptive strike. The Himalayas, then, are a second front, not for launching an offensive, but for preventing one. The goal is to deny India the belief that it can act opportunistically by strengthening logistics, fortifying air bases, and deploying rapid response units. China is sending a clear message. Even if war breaks out in the East, it can still hold the West. The logic follows basic military thinking. Good infrastructure buys time. With reliable roads, railways, and airports, Beijing will be able to respond more swiftly. And even though a two-front war may be unlikely, the perception of readiness could be enough to deter one entirely. That said, however, perception cuts both ways. India sees China's dual-use infrastructure not as defensive insurance, but as creeping encroachment. In the absence of trust, even a bunker can look like a forward base. And so what may be a strategy of containment from Beijing's point of view is seen as provocation from New Delhi's. This, then, is the paradox of the Himalayas today. What's meant to stabilize can just as easily escalate. That said, India is not defenseless. It operates more than a dozen air bases across its northern hinterlands. But when it comes to air power, the gap is hard to ignore. China not only has a quantitative edge, especially in combat jets, but it also holds a clear quality advantage. It's mass-producing fifth-generation fighters and developing sixth-generation models, while India is still struggling to produce reliable fourth-generation aircraft with no flyable fifth-gen prototype. The technological gap is vast. Add to that China's larger defense budget and greater number of active personnel, and the imbalance becomes even more apparent. Zooming out, the full picture starts to take shape. China is on a construction spree stretching across the arc of the Himalayas. It is building highways, upgrading air bases, and expanding its footprint all over the place. Of course, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these projects. Civilian or military, China has every right to build whatever it sees fit within its own borders. Still, in trying to deter a future war, China may be inadvertently daring India to start one.